Hello, everybody. Today we're going to talk about how to unlock profitable partnerships. I'm Kyle Patterson. I'm a senior PM at DAT. I'm focused on our network domain products, where we help you guys connect with brokers and work with them.
Yeah, my name is Robert Rouse. I'm one of the other product managers at DAT. I've been at DAT for almost 10 years, and I've worked in every aspect of the business. And so basically I've worked with a lot of carriers of you out there, some people I've met before, but also on the broker side as well back a couple years ago. So I have a great wealth of knowledge on both sides of the business that I'm hoping to share with you guys today.
All right, so Robert and I are going to take you through three things today. Our first one is going to be about preparing for the change in the market. The second one is we're going to talk about strategies, making strategic decisions to stay profitable. And our last thing we're going to spend some time on is, I'll stand back a little more, trust equals higher rates. So building profitable relationships. So Robert, do you want to start us off with the first one?
Yeah, I can definitely do that. All right, so one of the first things that we want to talk to you guys about is about the changing trucking market, right? And so I think everybody out there has experienced this in the last couple of years where you just don't really understand what the market is going to do, where it's going to go. One of the top questions that I get all the time is, when's the market going to turn? When are we going to see something change in the market? How is it going to improve? What it's going to be in Q4? What's it going to be in Q1 of next year? And one of the things that over the course of the last couple of years is we've seen these external factors and incidents that have changed the marketplace. And what's happened in that is that's also changed how people think about the market. And so one of the things I thought I really wanted to start with is, let's take a look at the market cycles, right? So this is something you probably heard somebody from DAT talk about before, Dean Croak or myself or others. And it's all about the market cycles, right? So one of the things, what we're looking at here, this graph, this is looking at all the years before the pandemic, right? Before COVID happened, this is what a blend of all of those years looked like, right? So why is that important, right? The reason why it's important is I don't even need to look at this chart. Most of you guys, if you've been in the trucking industry for a long time, before the pandemic, you would have been like, oh yeah, January, February, gonna be pretty slow. It's gonna start picking back up in March, gonna peak sometime May, June. It's gonna go back down, come back up September, October, go back down for the end of the month, or for the end of the year. That's predictable. We know that that's gonna happen. So so when we look at this whole thing, right, this is exactly what we see. Now, you see some years like 2018, right? We had the polar vortex that completely flipped the whole industry upside down for a couple of months. You saw rates go through the roof for that period of time. But that was an existential crisis to the market. You see the Houston hurricane also had the same thing. These external forces will change the market, but the market will self-regulate back into this same natural flow, right? So that's what we saw before the pandemic. So let's talk about the pandemic for a second. So this, again, this is total load volume, right, down here. This is what we saw with pre-pandemic, and now we're adding in 2023 into this. This top level, that's the pandemic, right? It didn't follow the same market cycles and turns that we would typically expect. It was vastly different. And the volume of loads that we saw during that period of time was absolutely insane, right? Shippers were moving trucks, half-loaded trucks. They were moving anything. As soon as they had it ready to be sold, it was on a truck, out the door, ready to go. They didn't really care too much how much it cost. They just said, get it there, right? And so what did that do? That created this new cycle that absolutely everybody started to go, oh, well, this is going to be the new norm, right? I heard that all the time where it's like, oh yeah, this is going to be the new norm, right? The consumer behavior changes, all of these things. This is now how everybody's going to behave. Now, when we go back here, This is what 2023 looked like. Exactly the same as what we saw before the pandemic. So what's going to happen in 2024? I can tell you that without a doubt, we're going to see loads start to pick up, which we've already seen in March. We're going to continue to see it rise until May, June, and then we're going to see it go back down and come back up. Now, the only difference between all of those years is plus or minus a couple percentage points up and down, right? The market is always going to be similar. It's just, is it above where a normal trend is, or is it below? That's really the only thing that changes between there. And this is where we're getting back. We're getting back to exactly the way it was before the pandemic. And this is predictably what we could expect to happen as we continue to see until there is some other major incident that is going to impact the market, right? Which typically are blips. They're a couple weeks, happens. Earlier this year, we saw it happen in the West Coast, where we got hit by snow across the country, and then that changed the market for 2 weeks, and then you saw it normalize back out. Those things happen, but you can always, almost always predict it's going to be right within this line. So how can you use that? So one of the things that we wanted to provide for everybody is a handy card. We're going to hand those out as they're walking around. But what the thing is you can always, typically there's a specific events that tell you this is going to happen, right? So some of them, for example, is in May. What happens in May? For produce carriers and for reefers, you already know that Mexico freight is going to start coming across. And while you may not be hauling produce, you need to know how that's going to impact your business. Because all that capacity that's doing something else is now going to be drawn down to the southern border to haul produce across the Mexican border and back into the States. You know, you get into August and you get into harvest season, you get into September, which is the fall produce season. And so understanding these market dynamics and where in the country they're happening will help you understand where that capacity is being pulled away, right? And what that does for you is if you are, you know, November in Northern California, the salad bowl shift, you know that produce carriers are going to be moving more of that, so you can take advantage of the freight that they're leaving behind, and typically we see freight rates start to increase. So you can use this as a predictor of what the market is going to do. Now, the other thing to think about is each one of these don't happen on a very specific day every single year. You just need to know a specific time frame, and then you need to use the tools and data to actually start to understand, okay, cool, I understand in May this is going to happen. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go look at the data to see, is this actually happening, right? Because you can't just use this, you have to then back it up with some data. So let's talk about that for a second. So one of the first tools that we definitely think everybody should use, if you have our new DAT One load board, this is going to be the national load counts. It's right there on the home screen on the right-hand side. And why is this important, right? So what this is telling us over here, you can see, is it's inbound and outbound load volumes for each state, right? Now, for California or Texas, this doesn't get you down to the market level, but it gets you a good idea. So how do you use this? So one of the examples I love to use is Colorado. There's two types of markets that we typically define. It's either a producer market or a consumer market. Producer markets are producing lots of goods, so they're always shipping out lots of things, versus a consumer market, they consume lots of goods because they have lots of people living there, but they don't manufacture a lot of stuff that needs to be put on trucks. So for Colorado, for example, I mean, I'm sure every of you guys have delivered a load in Colorado and been like, dang, there's no loads going out, right? And you can typically see that here. Now, it does fluctuate and change because some states, 1 month they're going to be producing a lot of goods, next month they might not be producing as much as well. And so what you can do is, if there's, like for California, there's a lot, California's a big one, but there's a lot of trucks, or there's more loads going into California than coming out. So what that tells you is when you get to California, you're competing versus a lot of other trucks fighting for fewer loads. So what does that do to the rates? Drives it down. Versus if you go to some place like Arkansas is a good one, right? Got a lot of Walmart stuff and Tyson coming out of there. So you have 261 loads going in, but a ton of 614 loads coming out, right? So those are the types of data that you can start to see. When you start to see any one of these events start to happen, you'll see that in the data here, right? Pacific Northwest, November, when Christmas trees really start hauling, you'll see Oregon completely flip. Oregon's not a huge producer market, right? But you'll see it flip when Christmas trees go, because all of a sudden they're moving thousands of loads of Christmas trees out of Oregon into all the other states. And so those are the data points that you can use. Another tool that you can use is bringing it down one step lower, down to the market level, right? So the market condition index, what it does is it takes each market, and so DAT has built all these markets, and what we've done is we've shown you how we delivered these markets is we look at where the rate changes. So like Memphis market, we expand that market until we start to see rates behave differently. So if we see Memphis go up 10 cents, we basically draw a line as we go, oh, where does that also happen in this whole area? And we draw this big market. And that's how we come up with all of these really unique markets. And then you can see down to the almost the 3-digit zip level, how is a specific market performing, right? So is Houston hot today? Is Memphis hot today? And those are the data points that then you can start to see, oh, you'll start to see Yuma, Arizona, right? Has a ton of produce that comes out in the wintertime in Yuma. And so you'll start to see Yuma change on the market conditions index. You'll start to see it go red, right? Because now it's got producing lots of trucks. The capacity hasn't shifted down to start taking all those loads, and they need to move that along. So this is another great tool for you to use. The other, as we shift from learning about the market, right? So all of that data is gonna tell you, okay, cool, do I understand the actual market and where things are? Once you understand the market dynamics, now you need to switch your thinking into, okay, cool, I've picked a market, Yuma, Arizona, right? There's great loads there. Looks like there's a tight capacity for trucks. That's a great market for me to go and get some loads out of there. So now you need to shift to look at how can you stay profitable. So this is a very, interesting thing that I've seen over the last couple of years. So in 2021 and 2022, I talked to hundreds of carriers that literally one of my first questions when I talk to almost any carrier is, do you know what your operating cost is, right? Do you know how much it costs for every mile you're driving? And over that time period, it shocked me. Most of what I heard from drivers is, I think I need to make $5,000 a week or $10K a month or whatever it was. They'd shoot me a number for what they need to make in a time period. And when I started to talk to them and going, I'm like, all right, well, awesome. How profitable are you? And it was during the COVID years where it was an abnormal market, and they're like, I'm super profitable. I talk to those same carriers now, and they're like, what's going on in the marketplace? I'm like, well, are you looking at your operating costs? Do you understand what data you actually are using to be profitable? And most of them still are going with that. I need to make 5K or 6K. You can run a lot of miles in a week and make 5K, 6K, but you're also burning a lot of fuel. You're also driving up all of your costs. You're putting a lot of stuff on your truck. And so you want to understand how that is. So what we did to help a lot of carriers is build a profitability estimator where you can put in your information, understand that. So for the owner-operators and drivers out there that have been doing this a long time, you already have a lot of this in your head. You already know what that number is, and you're constantly working on it. But if you don't, you can put these types of information in. The other tip that I really want to point out on this specific thing is always have an emergency equipment fund. So many drivers do not set aside money because it's like, my truck's running great. I don't need to set aside money, right? I want to, buy a bass boat or do something else, right? But even in the good times, you need to be setting aside money so that way, in case something inevitable does happen, it will happen to every single driver out there. Something's going to go wrong. You need to be prepared so that way you can do that. One of the tips that I've talked to a lot of drivers about for this specific thing is do not leave that emergency equipment fund in the same fund that you manage your entire business. put it in your savings, putting it in a specific savings account, put it somewhere where you don't even look at that account. You don't even want to know how much is in there, right? You just want to keep putting money in there, because what happens is if you see like you're saving up so much per load or per month, and then you look at it in 6 months, you're like, oh man, there's $200,000 in there. Like everything is great. It's like, but you don't know that, oh, actually, 100,000 of that is actually your emergency equipment fund. And so you want to separate that out so that way when something does happen, you go to those funds to make sure that you can keep operating your business. All right, and so what you can do from here is then you can use it, and I'm just giving an example here. This is going to be different for every single owner operator out here. If you have your truck paid off, this is going to be very different, right? If you are doing, brand new truck or bought your truck in the last little bit with higher interest rates, it's going to be different, right? And so that's why this is unique, is it's going to tell you for you, based on all the information you've provided, and the more information you provide, the better it's going to work for you. Are you going to be approximately profitable, right? Now, does that mean that you won't take unprofitable loads? No. There are certain markets, as we talked about with Denver, where you might have to dip into the red for that specific load, or else you have to make the decision of, is it better for my company to deadhead to a better market, or do I take a load and do it? And you just that's the give and take that you have to do. The other piece is, this is really helpful, right? It's like, oh, this load, I'm going to be profitable. But the other thing you have to do is write it down, right? Get a notebook, whatever you want to do, put it in your phone, write down your profitability for every single load. And so that way at the end of the month, you can add all that up and go, oh, well, yeah, I lost $100 on this one load, but I made $600 on these two loads that I got because I moved to a better market. And at the end of the month, I'm still profitable, which is where you want to be, right? Versus, potentially it doesn't make sense for you to deadhead a couple hundred miles to go get out of the southern tip of Florida, right? Up to maybe Atlanta or Charleston, one of those. So you just have to understand those trade-offs and use a tool to really help you understand those pieces. All right, so one of the other things that we wanted to talk about is really the relationship standpoint. So one of the reasons why Kyle and I, when we started talking about this, is the whole supply chain. I've been at DAT for almost a decade, and the market is constantly changing, right? If you go back years and years ago, there was different things that we were fighting in an industry that everybody knew about, and as we continue to go through, it's constantly changing. And so what we wanted to really talk to everybody about, and Kyle's an expert in this area, is how can you make those profitable relationships work?
Yeah, thanks, Robert. So things are always changing, right? Every business has their up moments and down moments. And so what are some tools that you can leverage to track on those partners, those brokers that you've been working with, to ensure that they're still healthy and they're doing well, or evaluate new ones? So the first one is that we recommend you take a look at is credit scores. So corporate or commercial credit is very different than our own personal credit. It's done on a scale of 0 to 100, and anything over 85 is considered good credit, right? So that's according to the credit agencies. So that's an indicator of how well that business is consistently paying their bills, right? Now, the higher they are, right, they are maintaining and having less hiccups in the process. And so if you see any brokers sitting over 90, they're most likely a good broker to work with, right? They're consistent at paying their bills through the contributions that are going into the credit agencies. If you see dips in that could be an indication that something has changed. I was talking with a carrier yesterday who said he remembers seeing a broker that was sitting at 95s for 3 months, dropped down to 65 for 2 months, and then went back up to 80, 85 and up. And he had called him. It's like, okay, so I look at a year, the early part of the first 6 months you kind of had some issues. It looks like you're doing okay now. What happened, right? So it gave him information to kind of start to explore what's going on with your business. Is that something I should be worried about, right? So leveraging the credit isn't your only tool, but it starts to give you a history of how that company's performing over time. Now, you might come in and take a look at a 12-month span, and especially in our tool, and there might be a business you're looking at, and the first 2 months are blank, or the first 3 or 4 months are blank. So why does that happen? Typically happens because it takes about 4 months for the credit agency to develop a credit score on that business. They're collecting over time, and then they're monitoring that on a monthly basis. So if it changes, we see a change in the score, and it's pretty rapid in that space. So it gives you information about that business that you can track on. Another thing to look at is their days to pay, right? So very simply, how fast are they paying their bills, right? How fast are they submitting to their banks, right? Covering their overhead costs, their mortgages that they have, right? Paying the carriers who are carrying loads for them. And that tracks how quickly they get that done, right? So days to pay. And so the more consistent you see a days to pay, right? It could be 20 days, 22 days, something like that. And they're staying on that track. It means that that brokerage is more consistent at paying their obligations quickly, right? Now that doesn't necessarily mean that if your agreement with that broker is to get paid in 30 days, that you're going to get paid in 20 days, right? But it does mean that in the consistency of them paying their bills across the top for the credit, that they are consistent as a business and covering their obligations, and down below, across a number of areas, they tend to pay quickly. So that's some information to use. Next thing to leverage is reviews. So in our directory platform, we have reviews where you can go in and write a review about a broker. And you can read the reviews that other carriers have written about their brokers that they've worked with. And this can be very helpful, right? If the folks that are going in are being intentional and thoughtful with the reviews that they're writing, that they're trying to explain the experience they had, and then that's useful information for you to evaluate of like, okay, this broker had a great credit score. I'm seeing here maybe for example, it's a 3-star, but it was because there was some confusion on the details. Well, that gives you some insight of what to follow up with the broker before you confirm that load, right? I see here this one doesn't give us enough details. I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about that before I confirm the load. So reviews can be helpful as a number of different things in vetting and considering the broker you work with. Now it's all right, so the fire alarm's going off. Well, I'll keep going until we... All right. It's important, though, that if you're going to leverage or use reviews, that you put in a really good review. And what I mean by that is I'm not saying you write a nice review for your broker, but you write an intentional review for that broker that is informative, right? So, you know, the world has changed a lot in the last... The world's changed a lot in the last couple of years, right? Cyber tends to be a very challenging thing that all of us are dealing with. So cybersecurity, cyber safety. So we thought we'd take a moment and talk about like how you leverage the information that's being shared with you. So weird. So there's really 4 things, and I'm going to touch on phishing in just a moment. But password management, using a password manager is a really important thing. It can help you quite a bit. Antivirus software on your desktop, or using an authenticator app on your mobile. And that will help you as you use systems if you're leveraging those authenticator apps. Okay? So I want to talk about phishing real quick before we end this. So Google shared that they're blocking about 100 million phishing attempts every day. So it's not a small issue, right? It's a super big issue, and we all get caught by it. And the folks that are the bad actors in this space are really smart, and they're trying to do everything they can to confuse all of us, right? So as you think about the emails you receive and how to respond to them, emails demanding urgent action, take more time looking at that. Who did it come from? What's in the URL from them, or what's the email address look like? Does anything about it feel weird? And if any moment your gut says, don't continue, don't, right? If they're asking you to click links.
Attention exhibitors, this is a false alarm. Please carry on. False alarm. We'll get the alarm turned off soon.
All right. So anything that's demanding you urgent access. Emails with bad grammar or spelling, right? There are some very creative email addresses where they're changing one letter, right? They're adding a random space in there. Look out for those things. Emails with unfamiliar greetings, right? Your name is Jody, that's saying Bill, probably not for you, right? Inconsistent addresses and links, suspicious attachments, like you don't want to click on any of that. Emails requesting credentials, don't ever do it, right? That's a no-fly zone. And then too good to be true, right? I've got an amazing opportunity, you're gonna make more than anywhere else. So phishing itself is a massive thing. And if you, at any point where you're uncomfortable with what you're looking at, if there's links in there that you're not sure about, you know the business. If, for example, you're working with DAT, call DAT and go, I got this email, I have questions. Don't jump on links and start following it if you're not sure, right? And then how do you show up well for the brokers, right? So in talking to brokers and having conversations with them, these are some of the things that they're looking at to us and asking like how current and how active or accurate is the information we're seeing. So DAT profile. If you're a customer, keep your profile up to date with us, right? It's easy to go in and set up one time and move on, right? And then conduct your business, but your business evolves and changes. So the more you keep that accurate with us, the better you show up to the broker customers when they're looking at your business, right? Your MCS 150, update that annually. I know that there's a longer term from the government on doing that, but if you can do that on an annual basis, it keeps the data and information in the systems up to date, and brokers are reviewing that. And then make sure your insurance is current. It's probably the number one thing that gets booking a load held up, is that you're 30 days out. Brokers are going to be hesitant to book on those. So anything you do, you can keep your insurance up to date and active, and have that will show up better to the brokers as they're evaluating and vetting you. So I guess to sum that whole thing up, you may have broker partners that have been incredible partners to you, and you've worked with them for years. Things always change. So if we're out to protect our business, if we're out to ensure that we're always in the right partnership, that we're driving profitability for our business, take the extra minute or two to continue to vet those brokers, even if you have an amazing relationship. Just take the minute to check. Doesn't mean they've changed, but sometimes it happens, right? So that's it. Robert, do you want to add anything?
No, I think that really covers it up. The big thing that as you go through the entire thing, you need to think about all the different data that we provided for you. First off, we're getting back to normal on the spot market, right? We're not in the 2021, 2022 years anymore. We're back to a more normal expectation of where the market is. Using data is going to be the next frontier of how that is. There's a lot of carriers out there that already are doing this, that use data for everything in their negotiations, how they're handling their business, and that's what's excelling them and making them successful. And last, know your numbers. Even if you don't want to use DAT's profit estimator, every carrier out there, please, one of the first things I know OIDA right before us talked about this as well, is write down all of your costs, either variable or fixed cost. Fixed cost is just all the stuff that no matter if you don't drive a single mile on that, all those bills come due. Variable cost is all your fuel and other maintenance costs, things like that. Write those down and keep those numbers. Even if you're doing it on a scratch pad, doing it like that, it's so important. That's how you're going to continue to manage your business and make sure you're successful. And so with that, we're open to asking any questions and answering anything you guys have.
So, and real quick, we would love to hear your questions. If you would rather come over and talk to us in our booth, we're over in the West Wing. We're in booth 65216. And we've got a group of people over there happy to answer any question you have. So we're open to questions.
Sweet.
All right.
Oh, you got a question?
Wonderful presentation also. My name is Gretchen. I'm with Loan Money Trucking Services. And one of my questions was, I love the way that you guys are kind of increasing security as far as dispatching and making sure that they actually have carriers to kind of eliminate the double brokering situation. My question is, are there any plans as far as monitoring on the broker side or aspect to help us with knowing who we should trust, who we shouldn't trust? Because sometimes we can see a broker in there with a valid credit score and it still end up being a double broker. So are there any precautionary measures going to be implemented there, or is anything in place?
So we're constantly evaluating how to collect the right data across our entire network and how to present that out to our customers. So yeah, we're actively working on all users of our platform, verifying who they are, what they do. And so we're working towards solutions for that, for sure.